I made croissants, okay? Me. I suck at baking. Mr. is only good at savory foods. I made croissants. Check it out. Look at that. I need y'all to see this. Look at those croissants. Ooh, those look good. Nice and brown and buttery. I had to cut this one ahead of time. Look at the cross sections. Whew. That is beautiful. Making croissants is a work of art as well as a labor of love. I'm here to show you that it's not as hard as you think. Now, this recipe is based off of award-winning pastry chef and New York Times best-selling author Claire Saffitz. What could possibly go wrong? No, seriously, what could possibly go wrong? I ain't gonna hold you. It took me a few times to pronounce this word correctly, but the first step in making your croissants is building the trompe. See the creatively designed pop-up for the definition. I used the food scale for this part. Since it is Claire Saffitz's recipe, I wanted to make sure I followed it to a T. I used 66 grams of granulated sugar. Next, I added a tablespoon of kosher salt. I think she used sea salt, but kosher was all that I had, and as with any recipe that I post, make the best use of what you have. So now I want to prepare the yeast, and I use 66 grams of warm whole milk at about 105 degrees, followed by 214 grams of water at the same temperature. Anything higher will kill the yeast, so be careful when warming the water and milk. My personal recommendation is using active dry yeast, roughly 7 grams of it. Claire added the yeast directly into the dry mixer. I'm adding mine into my wet mixture and whisking until well combined. You should see bubbles begin to form, and that's when I cover the bowl for a few minutes to let the yeast further activate. Now into a mixing bowl, I'm adding 605 grams of bread flour, or use a high protein all-purpose flour if you have it. The high amount of protein helps to keep the structural integrity of the croissants during the entire process. Now, I sift my flour. I know it may not be necessary, but personally, I've always felt that it made for a smoother dough, so I'd recommend it. Once the flour is added, I'll add the rest of my dry ingredients to the bowl, attach it to my stand mixer, and turn it on low speed to bring everything all together. At this point, you can add your wet mixture. The dough should start to come together. Use a plastic spatula to scrape down the sides. This process should take roughly about 6 or 7 minutes per se. As you can see, everything's working out quite nicely, but we're not finished. The dough looks a little like chewed up gumballs. Sorry, that's the best thing that I could think of, but it will look a little raggedy. That's perfectly fine. What we want to do is to grab a kitchen towel, cover our bowl for about 15 minutes, and this will allow the dough to rest and develop that gluten. 15 minutes have passed, and we're going to begin the next step of the trompe. Turn your mixer back on at low at about a speed of 2 or 3, then add your butter. This is about 1/4 cup of butter, or 57 grams to be exact, and I took it straight out of the freezer. The cold butter mixed in with the dough will not only help to smoothen it out, but it's going to help with developing those layers later on. This takes about 7 minutes or so with a stand mixer. Now, as you can see, we started off with a shaggy, almost penetrable dough. That cold butter mixed in, you can see the dough start to get smoother. And because we're using bread flour, the structure of that croissant will remain in place. Now that you have your dough formed, let's get it onto our countertop and roll it into a smooth ball. Tuck it underneath itself to prevent the dough from spreading apart during the rise. Next, you want to cut a cross or an X like so, and this is done to help that rectangular shape we need when forming our croissants near the end. For now, we're going to let this rest at room temperature for about an hour, then I place it in the fridge overnight to get a cold rise. Honestly, I'd like to know who sat in their kitchen and was like, I'ma smash some butter with a rolling pin and see what it does. See, that's the beauty of cooking in my opinion, but we'll get to that in another video. Now, the butter block is essential for creating those flaky, puffy layers you see in most croissants. Butter with a higher percentage of fat is highly recommended, so I would personally suggest using Kerrygold butter. Now, for this butter block, it requires 3 sticks, and what I did was I lined up each of the sticks, folding up parchment paper over it like an envelope. Now, you want to smash that down, but do it gently if that makes sense. The idea is to create a literal block of butter so that it doesn't lose its shape or form. Now, banging this does get very loud, so if you have neighbors that complain, just put some headphones on and ignore them like I did. Now it's going to get to the point where the butter flattens out and you can gently roll it into any empty crevice. The idea is to manipulate the butter so we get that perfect rectangle that won't bend or break when we put it in that dough. Time being, let's get this in the fridge overnight as we're ready for day 2 and the next steps. So now it's a whole day later and we can see that that dough has definitely doubled in size. That cross cut helped it to get to that rectangular shape we wanted, so now we can assemble. I wrap the dough in plastic wrap and I use my rolling pin to manipulate it into a more uniform shape. After it's rolled out, we place it in the freezer for 20 minutes, then into the fridge for about an hour. Now, the reason we're doing this is that once we add the butter, we want that dough as cold as possible so it keeps the butter block firm without it melting. Melted butter will mean messier croissants, so if you ever get to the point where you feel the dough needs a little bit more time, if it's too warm, if it won't budge, just quickly wrap it up like an unwanted conversation and put it in the fridge to chill for a bit. As you can see, the butter is big enough to be placed in the dough, but with enough room to cover that block. Fold the dough over on one side like so, then on the other side as well without it overlapping. Next, you want to pinch it down and crimp the sides up like this. Now once that's done, carefully press down with your rolling pin and roll it until the butter spreads evenly across that dough. For this step, I added a little bit of flour at the bottom and to the top to prevent it from sticking to the surface. Once it's to my desired length, you're going to fold it once like this towards the center and another fold like this, and finally over the initial fold so you get 4 layers like so. This is what's known as the first turn. Similar to earlier, we want that dough to remain nice and cold, so we're going to place it in plastic wrap once again, put it in the freezer for 20 minutes and in the fridge for another hour. The next step is the final turn. This is simply rolling the dough out, giving it a simple fold like so, and then we wrap it up and place it back in the fridge again. Personally, you only need a few hours to do this, but since I wanted to bake my croissants fresh in the morning, I simply left the dough out in the fridge overnight. So it's the next day, and what I did was simply take the dough out, roll it up into a rectangle, then I put it back in the fridge to freeze for a couple more hours. I just wanted to make sure that the dough was perfect. Alright y'all, so now I wanted to shape up this block a little bit. It didn't come out to be the perfect rectangle as I anticipated, but that's okay. I shaped it out as best as I could by hand, and I'll cut the edges off to even it out. Now using measuring tape, I measured and cut about 1-inch slits so when I cut my dough out, I get even slabs. From here, I took my pizza cutter and created triangles out of each slab. Then I stretched the sides out big like this, pulling it gently so, and rolling it from the bottom up to form that croissant shape. Press it down gently like so, and this keeps that end piece intact. Do this for the rest of your croissants, and we're going to proof it one last time, again, using a method I learned from Claire. I placed some fresh plastic wrap over the croissants. Then I got a frying pan filled with water and heated it until you see steam forming. Once that steam has formed, you're going to place it in the bottom rack of your oven. You can do this while you shape your croissants. Once they're shaped, remove the pan from the oven, then add the croissants to proof. This steam provides the ideal warm environment without melting that butter. I left this in the oven for about 2 hours before removing. Before you bake, let's get an egg wash going, and we're going to get those croissants beautiful and brown. I used 1 egg yolk followed by a tablespoon of heavy cream. You're going to mix this until it's well combined. Don't have heavy cream, you can simply use water, but I feel that heavy cream gives it a bit more thickness and a glossier texture. Spread the croissants amongst 2 baking sheets, and some of these ideally came out bigger than I anticipated, but that's okay. Now just to be safe, we're going to place these in the freezer for 20 minutes so we can get that butter to firm right back up. Now, while this happens, preheat the oven at 375 degrees. Place the croissants in the oven for 20 minutes and switch racks and bake for an additional 10 to 15 minutes. The croissants will come out beautiful and golden brown like so. And now we eat.
Go to my website, cookingwithpatlee.com. I'll put the link in the description. Get all of my recipes. Again, make sure you follow, like, share, subscribe for more recipes like these. And until the next time we feast, peace.